Everyone, it's Patrick from Patrick and Friends Music Company, and today we're going to be talking about active listening. Now, we're going to be listening to the Inversions album by Stevie Wonder, just the first 3 songs for the sake of keeping it pretty short for this video. But you can find our other active listening series on our Patreon, so make sure you check that out. Now, before we get started, I want to talk a little bit about the format because you're not going to hear music come through the screen. So to be able to listen along, you have to pull up Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, whatever you can do to listen to the Stevie Wonder album. Just pull it up on your own, and you're gonna have to, either put in headphones or you can listen out loud. I'm gonna be putting in headphones. I'm gonna share my screen so you're gonna see where I am in the song. Then we're gonna pause after each song and talk about it. So I also just want to mention that I stole this idea, this format, from someone named Tahir Moore. He's a YouTuber and a comedian, really funny, has a great channel. And on it, he has the best silent listening party where he listens to music in the same format and talks about it with a couple other people. So make sure you check him out. I'll include his link to his channel in the description below. There's 2 main types of listening that I like to talk about: passive and active listening. Passive listening is when you're just listening to a song, whether it's in the background, on in the car, on with friends. You might be paying attention to it, but you're not diving into the detail and the elements of the music. Active listening is when you kind of put a microscope on either certain elements of the music, of the song, or a general broad sort of deep dive into the music. And this can be done in many different ways, and it's going to depend on the level you're at with your musical journey. So if you're maybe really advanced professional, they'll be figuring out the exact chord voicings, the exact harmony, the melody, right there on the spot while they're listening. That's a very high level. But there's also different elements that you can listen to depending on if you're on a lower level, beginner level, sort of intermediate. For example, maybe you just want to listen to the form of the song. So whether it's an AABA form, ABA form, chorus, verse, intro, ending. Or maybe you just want to listen to a specific instrument. And this is what I highly suggest if you're beginning to actively listen. Just listen to one instrument, focus on it. So say it's the drums, listen to the kick drum, listen to the snare drum, cymbals, hi-hat, see how they're all interacting, try to get the patterns down, and see how the drums in general are sort of adding to the song, what element and what sort of, how they fit in with the whole song and with the rest of the group. So when we're listening to this, we're going to talk about little general broad strokes. We're not going to go super into detail, but I just want to kind of get you started if this is your first time active listening. So I'm going to pop in my headphones, I'm going to pull up Spotify, and we're going to get started. Okay, so the first track is Too High. So let's get started. 3, 2, 1. All right. So that was certainly interesting. So, Stevie, I mean, when you talk about Stevie compositionally and harmonically, he's just really at another level. I mean, this might be something you hear on the radio, but harmonically, it's like nothing else you'll hear on the radio. A lot of times, pop music is can be simple chords, simple harmony, but Stevie really, really takes that to another level. So, not to go into too deep into, the exact what the exact chords are or anything like that, but talking about the difference between sort of that refrain and then going into the verse, if you want to call it that. So the refrain, what's happening is that he has a steady bass note. So I'm pretty sure I'm familiar with the song a little bit. I'm pretty sure it's like an E bass note maybe. Um, and then he has these sort of chords going over the top that are kind of with the mixture of the two sound pretty dissonant at times. And I think what helps it sound a little more appealing to the ear during the too high. Sorry, I can't sing that high, but during the too high part is the way that the chords follow the melody. So maybe if it was just chords and the melody was doing something else different, it might not fit that well. It might not really mesh together, but the fact that the melody is sort of following the chords and there is that dissonance helps it, a little more appealing to the ear. But you have that kind of steady bass line on one note, not really doing too much, and then you kind of go into a little more of a resolution with a little less dissonant chords in sort of the verse. You know, I believe some minor chords and some minor ninth chords, and then the bass line has sort of the dun da 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 da, sort of that constant sort of movement now. So it's contrasting during that too high part where it's very stagnant. Now you have a very moving bass line, a lot of things happening in the drums. It switches to the ride, sort of on the bellow of the ride, with a little more involved pattern, and then the like I said, the bass is more involved, and the chords a little less dissonant. So it's kind of how I kind of look at it is it's kind of contrasting between these two things, and I'm sure that might I don't know the lyrics, 100% completely, but I think that's sort of the idea, contrasting those two sections, sort of giving off a different message, different atmosphere during those two sections that sort of leave the listener not always guessing, but keeps the listener interested, right? If it was just maybe that constant with that rhythm sort of going on the entire time, the listener might be like, okay, you know, I'm sort of getting bored of this after a little bit because it's the same thing. But that contrast in both harmonic, dissonance and resolution, and also just rhythmic involvement between a little more stagnant and a little more involved, really keeps the listener engaged. Really, I mean, it kept me engaged. You're always wondering whether it's going to stay like that, going to move. And this contrast, I think, is really almost defines the song. Besides, I mean, there's a lot of things that define the song. Harmony, definitely. Honestly, you can do a whole video on just the harmony in the song and really breaking it down. It's really incredible. And I think overall, the instrumentation is important, the electric piano, and I believe the bass, I don't know if it's a real bass with some effects on it, maybe like a phaser or something like that, or it's a synth bass or something like that. But I think that adds to the electric, piano vibe. It's almost like like a smooth song, but with a lot going on. And I think if the instrumentation was different, if you listen to this song, on just like regular piano and, a regular like clean bass, no effects, it would sound completely different. So I think that sort of adds to the smoothness, to the really dissonant sort of too high chorus part. I think all of that together is what really makes a song, in my opinion. Obviously, there's other things you can be listening for. There's a lot of stuff going on, but I think that's it's a great tune, also a great opening tune on an album. And we can talk a little bit more about that in a second. All right, so let's go to our second song. It's going to be Visions. All right. So, so that visions, that greatly composed and produced. Now, when I hear this, number one thing is layering of parts. What I mean by that, if you have stereo headphones in or speakers, you'll hear that there is three guitar parts, sometimes electric piano just layered in there, uh, and then a bass part, and then Stevie singing, and layering of different parts, taking three at times very different parts and putting them together to create sort of one composition. So there was one guitar that I would say that I was hearing. I don't know if my headphones were in correctly, but I was hearing in my left ear that was uh, a little more, picked through. So like it was basically like arpeggiating chords. It sounded like to me. And then you had sort of a cleanish electric guitar playing this constant sort of melodic motif. Um, da, 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 da. Yeah, this constant melodic motif kind of going on throughout the entire song. So I was just thinking about it there. And then you have this other acoustic guitar that's, if it wasn't there, would you think it's the end of the world? No. But it adds such an extra just element to the song. I think it almost is like what takes it from here to just here. It's sort of highlighting different parts of the other acoustic guitar. It's sometimes playing sort of these either chromatic descending lines that is highlighting the important harmony notes. So like the notes of the chord that really brings out what the chord is, whether it's major, minor, a seventh, a ninth, sort of thing. And then adding just other elements. It's sometimes picking along with the other guitar. It's sometimes playing along with the other guitar. It's sometimes hitting chords. Sometimes playing little melodies in between. So a lot of stuff going on, and together, one guitar by itself sounds fine. The other guitar probably by itself sounds fine, but when you put it together, it adds a whole nother element. And like I said, you have that electric guitar just floating over the top, sort of putting in a melody. And then you have Stevie, I would say, again, floating sort of over this a lot of stuff happening, picking wise, some very strong picking and rhythm that you can hear with Stevie sort of floating on top. Um, yeah, a lot of layering going on. And then the other thing is just melody. There's so much melody going on between obviously Stevie, but between the electric guitar melody motif, even the bass line where it's playing this ascending line during parts of the song. And then you have sort of the acoustic guitar sort of providing another melody at times. There's so much intertwining melody that it really makes such an interesting song. Then on top of that, you have it's all acoustic. So if you compare it to our first, which was very electric, smooth electric, and then you now have this completely acoustic. I also believe it was either upright acoustic bass, which I would guess, or maybe even just a regular like acoustic, a bass, looks like an electric bass, but acoustic bass. Going and the acoustic, the bass is going between playing so that line, that melodic bass line, and then sort of just outlining the bass notes of the chord. So this sort of contrast, right? No drums, just acoustic, all acoustic. I think really breaks up the album well. So you hit with a nice smooth acoustic, smooth electric song, and for the first track of the album, and then you kind of break it all down and just make it all acoustic. Softer, but still a lot of stuff going on. So it's not. I wouldn't say it's stripped down because it's not just an acoustic guitar and Stevie, right? It's a lot of stuff going on and Stevie on top. And even the small things I think is what really makes a song. Even like the occasional electric piano on top, it's really not that present throughout the song, but I think the layering and the melodic layering is what takes this song to a new level and what really makes it a well composed and produced song. All right. Again, we could talk about this for a while, but let's go on to our next song. So next song is going to be a pretty popular Stevie song. It's going to be Living for the City. So let's hear this one. So, so very again very popular Stevie song. Uh, and there's lot to break down. So we're gonna we're gonna maybe not keep it as can't go into all of that, but definitely a lot going on. So kind of the one contrasting thing is obviously we go back from the acoustic sort of sound from our last song back to a much more involved sound. And one thing is that almost constant backbeat. Mm, 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 mm. Right, that constant backbeat. That maybe is not happening at every single point in the song, but for a lot of the song. At the beginning, right, and that's what's really keeping the beat while there's no drums, and the drums come in and start to play along and really help keep that beat with the bass drum going. Um, and then a couple things. This is, I mean, harmonically, Stevie is on again another level as far as in pop R&B, soul, whatever you want to define it as. Um, he has this getting into. We're not gonna get too deep into Stevie harmony again. That could be a whole other video, but again, him harmonically, it's a lot of times what you would call chromatic harmony. What I mean by that is harmony where you're not just staying in the notes in the key. You still have a key center, but whether it's through many different, it can be through many different avenues, but whether it's through secondary dominant chords or through many different forms. I don't want to dive too deep into it. Is you're basically allowing melody notes outside of the actual key. So, like if you're in C major, you might have a C sharp in there because he's using harmony that allows that to happen. And this allows you to expand your melodic concept so much because if you just have to stay in one key the whole time, it really, sort of limits you to that. And this is what Stevie's able to get these different sounds from. And the contrast, again, I think melodically this time between the chorus and the verse, if you want to call it that, is a lot on what makes the bare bones of the song. That he goes and he doubles, right? Actually, I don't know if you call it the chorus and the verse, but he doubles that part with the synth, just not the words, but the the humming or the singing, whatever you want to call it with. He doubles it with a synth on top. A very almost, triumphant melody, if you want to call it that. I think that's maybe the best way to describe it. And then that, during the rest of the song where it's very bluesy, really just like a straight up blues, could be an R&B, soul blues group just, playing along, which is something that Stevie's known for, obviously. But the other part, I don't know if you want to call it the chorus, is really where it almost breaks out of that traditional sort of vibe, away from that blues vibe to this whole nother thing. And I would have to go deep dive, listen to the lyrics, but I feel like maybe that is part of the message. If you notice, there's a little part in the middle, the message he's trying to get across with the song. Probably those two different things is sort of emphasizing the message he wants to get across with his song. Sort of, guessing that. Would have to dive deeper into the lyrics to really sort of give a better opinion on that. Again, we can go deep, but the one other, I think, so important thing, I think if you're composing, if you're looking at composition, trying to become a writer, I think first of all, listening to Stevie is a great way to start. But the way he takes one element, one idea, and adds so much more to it, so you're really taking the same concept, same melodic, harmonic concept at times, and just adding more to it. So what I mean is, the second time he went around in the verse, maybe it was the third time, he added I'm forgetting the word of what it's called now, but basically a secondary melody. If comment if you're, it's missing me right now, but if you know the term for that, where he's singing and there's almost like a call and response with like a synth on top. It's very subtle, but it adds an extra element to that. And then he goes along and adds a little bit more each time. And then at the end, right, the same thing's happening, but he's adding harmony with other voices, right? He's adding, he sort of has this growl. I'm pretty sure it's him. He has like this growling voice, which is a different element than before. and then he has harmony, I believe, if I can remember, it's above and below him, with the synth, I think, doubling the melody too. So a lot going on. It's adding another element. So it's taking the same idea, but it's keeping your audiences interested. It's adding and building and building and building and building in this song, which is so much contrary to a lot of pop music you might listen to, because a lot of pop music is just steady, it has that constant beat, but it sort of stays the same. It just repeats, a verse and a chorus, may add something small, but it doesn't really build. Like this song builds and builds and builds. And then the ending we can dive into, but that ending is crazy. That's the climax of, basically I think the climax of the song. Well, a lot of songs might go up and down, up and down. I think this one constantly builds to the end. There's a lot of stuff going on that we could dive into. The way the bass moves, the way some of the dissonance sort of creeps into that less dissonant part, with some of the bass and the chords, and then the way they just add the elements and it all sort of morphs and gives you a certain sound and emotion together. I think, again, just compositionally, production wise, it's on another level than a lot of stuff you'll listen to. So there was a lot to break down, and I hope you really enjoyed listening to us. Obviously, I gave my thoughts in it, but when you're listening, you might be focusing on some different things. And I honestly suggest to go back if you really enjoyed one of these songs. Go back and listen again and again and again till you can really get everything that's going on. You might want to write stuff down while you go, just notes, and so you don't forget. There's so much to unpack with these songs that we could speak in an hour on each song. But also, I suggest also listening to the whole album. Obviously, listen to the first 3 songs for time purposes, but listening to the album, seeing how it's constructed, you'll sort of get a bigger picture of the message and how maybe each song was composed or produced to sort of fit into that space in the album to go front to back. Now, I hope to see you in the next video, but in the meantime, I hope you enjoyed this, and check out our next video on Patrick and Friends Music Company.